There's really one reason that we're here, and that's to stand up for democracy.
We're here 6 months after the G20 weekend back in June, and we're asking for, or demanding at this point, a public inquiry.
It was very clear on the weekend of the G20 that we did not live in a democratic province or country.
Why were these decisions made, and why were they made behind closed doors where no one can know anything?
Anyone who was out on the streets, who was hassled by police, anyone who was witness to the fact, as I was inside that building while the House was in session, that an old regulation could be dusted off and put into process by a cabinet without even letting elected representatives know, never mind the people of Ontario know, a policy that then resulted in mass arrest, mass detention. I saw in Parkdale, the occupation of Parkdale, that's all I can call it. Police came in and closed down Queen Street. They were provocative. They were provoking problems. This is directly the result of actions by the Dalton McGuinty cabinet. We in the NDP have called for an inquiry both federally and provincially. We're thankful that Andre Morin brought in his report. It was an excellent report, but we need to hold these people accountable. Yes. We live in I mean, for a weekend we lived in a police state. If we think that we have democracy, look how paper thin that so-called democracy was that weekend. Look how quickly they could take away all of our valuable rights. So somebody has to be held accountable. We need an inquiry so we can call people to testify. We need to get to the bottom of who gave the orders, and we need to hold them to the people, in front of the people that they so denigrated that weekend. I'm sorry that this happened while it was on my watch and the watch of all the members of Provincial Parliament. And you know, it's really not even a right or a left issue, because nobody in that place knew about the secret law. Whether you're a libertarian or a Marxist, everybody was concerned about the lack of democratic freedoms that weekend. Right. We want a voice. This is not about one voice, it's about everyone having any voice. So please call your MPPs, call your MPs, demand that we have a real inquiry and really hold lawmakers, police chiefs and others to account for what happened that weekend. It was a travesty. Thank you for coming out.
After we've had one officer charged, and only because there was like 8 different angles from which he was filmed to finally prove it, and like 1 out of 20,000 did wrong. We need to do a little bit more work, and then that's just part of a systemic problem. When you have Chief Bill Blair lying at every corner, when you have the Ontario Ombudsman saying Dalton McGuinty and his government totally broke the Constitution with this secret law, all the way up to the RCMP and Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, it's a systemic problem, and people are saying we need a public inquiry. 6 months later, it's still in the news, things are still coming out. You have Canada's largest mass arrest. Why not just find out the truth, don't we? Isn't it our responsibility as Canadian citizens to find out? So what you have here is probably a good collection of responsible Canadians who say, hey, we spent $2 billion, 1,000 people got arrested, most of them are released without charges. We need to explore what's happening. Well, I think you find in other cities after the G20 was there, the issues kept going for years and years after. I mean, any time you have confrontations between sort of police and protesters at large events like G8 and G20, it is the longest drawn out system you could imagine. This is the first time I've been on this side of anything like this. I got arrested at G20, put in a cage, held there for 24 hours. It was absolute insanity in the detention center, and it just has kind of affected me since. So I think that the fact that we're here 6 months later is in some ways infuriating, but in some ways inspiring. You even have some mainstream media still pushing to keep this story in the headlines, which sometimes doesn't happen. I think I think as the longer people raise their voices about it, the more sort of the stench reaches the noses of other Canadians, and they're like, wait a minute, something's stinky here.
Out of curiosity and historical interest, went out on the Friday evening and looked at what was happening at Yonge and Carlton, and was intrigued at how much police presence there was. I hadn't really expected that, even though I knew the fence was going up. I dropped my son and his girlfriend off the next morning to march and protest. They came in from out of town especially to do that. We made signs and packed lunches and did all that sort of thing, and I just hung around. Well, by midnight, I was still there. I was absolutely appalled. I was angry. I'd been gassed. Had my walking stick taken away from me and broken. I had a wooden one then. The kids were part of the group with me that was chased out of Queen's Park around 5:30 or 7, I think maybe. We went down Yonge Street and we were very, very angry, very upset. That was when I saw all of the stuff that had happened from the people that broke windows and so on, and I hadn't known that was happening. I'd been in Queen's Park all day. And finally, I was so exhausted, I just left the kids at near the Esplanade, and I said, I have to go home. And by the time I got back to my car, my cell phone was ringing, and they were screaming that they were being arrested, and I needed to do something, and I couldn't find them. I didn't know where they'd gone. I was at Eastern Avenue first thing the next morning, and a police officer said, I don't know where they are. They may be here. And I said, well, will you take good care of them? He said, ma'am, this is not a third world country. Can you believe that? I mean, the irony of that statement, given what happened later. So yeah, that's why I'm here. It was terrible not knowing, and when they finally rolled out of there at midnight and told me what had happened to them, I was just furious. I mean, as a mom, but also as a citizen, I was just furious. I'd seen people get hurt and dragged off all day long, and again on the Sunday morning. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. There is no legitimacy involved in what they did in any way. We protested at Queen's Park for childcare, which is my field, and various other things for years. Never have we been chased out. Never have we been hurt and gassed and been shot at. It's unbelievable.
There was no communication strategy, and I think that was by design as much as anything else. It was government by stealth. It was security measures by stealth. That lack of communication is the chaos that happened that weekend. Tell me who it is. CSIS, RCMP, Canadian military, U.S. Secret Service. Tell me who they were. Who are they accountable to? And they're not accountable to anybody. And that's a statement of fact.